Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle from Quinnipiac University, a third-year student in accounting major. I'd like to welcome you to the Women in Finance Opportunities and Challenges panel. It is my pleasure to introduce Jessica Iorio, the moderator of this session. The moderator for this session is Jessica Iorio, Divisional Operations Director and Senior VP at Rockefeller Capital Management. The first panelist is Leslie Leonhardt, Vice President of Fidelity Investments. The second panelist is Donna Yip, Managing Director of Entourage Capital. The third panelist is Caitlin Maxwell, Senior Manager, EY. Please welcome our panelist and moderator of this session. Thank you.
So good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us. And Danielle, thank you for that warm welcome. So my name is Jessica Iorio, as Danielle mentioned, and today we have an amazing panel. And our goal today is whatever your major is, your career goal is, that you'll come away with something, a new idea, fresh perspective, new strategy that you can apply in the future. So with that, we'll get started. Our first question today is, can you talk about the job market when you started and compare it to where it is today and then where you see your future? So if we're going to go ahead, I'll turn it to you, Donna, to kick us off.
Sure. So it's sort of funny. We're just hanging out in the green room and talking about what it was like when some of us had started. We're talking about AOL Instant Messenger as sort of like the commonality of what technology was when we all started. And I think like the idea is like, I probably started working like the late 90s, early 2000s. And the idea of, FaceTime and meeting in real life and sitting across the table from someone is like really important. And I think that sort of migrated over the last like 20 some years where, the amount of time you're dedicated to working on a project is measured by like time and input and
fidelity. The fact that I could chew gum and walk at the same time I was in. That might have been a slight exaggeration, but there were a lot of jobs. And for people like me who are political science and economics, there were jobs, and there were a lot of people in different majors. I used to sit next to a philosophy major when I was on the phones, who would quote Socrates all day. Because there were so many jobs, there were a lot of people drawn to the industry. So that was, I think an unusual, set of events, but I feel right now that we're coming into the same thing with a lot of job growth in financial services, especially where I am, which is sort of the retail investing for a number of reasons. A lot of it is, going to zero commissions, more people trading, the COVID effect. We have so many people entering the market right now and trading and investing, especially at such a young age. So I feel for all of those you that want to go into financial services, I feel you're lucky that you are probably able to start at a time like I did, where there are a lot of jobs available in financial services. I would also say that when I entered the workforce, the people that had graduated before me told me there would be a lot of difficulty for me as a woman. That, yeah, you can get those entry-level jobs, but to attain leadership positions, it would be very difficult. I do have to say, and maybe some of that was my job choice too, because I've been at Fidelity over 25 years, but I never felt that glass ceiling. I never had any problem advancing in my career. And I think companies now are spending just more and more effort at sort of growing women in the workforce, as well as making sure they're able to stay in the workforce. So I think that's really positive. And I would say the last thing that's different is I feel like when I entered the workforce, the salaries were so low. I think I made $12,000 a year. Luckily, I was able to live with my parents, but my loans were so low, and the cost of college is so high now. I think in the last, it's going up maybe 150% in the past 20 years. And so but my loans were little. My loans were little, my salary was little. And I think you guys are sort of in a tough position that, that the salaries might not be really high, but you guys have a lot of debt to deal with. So there might be a lot of pressure, or some people, and I know of a couple of students that actually have two jobs to sort of meet their financial obligations. So I think you do have some challenges there.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, Leslie, you're making me feel young. I feel like it's not every day that I feel young these days. I've been at EY about 11 years now, and I'm a senior manager, and I work with so many people just starting out from college and stuff. So I definitely have less experience than both Donna and Leslie, but I like hearing Leslie you talk, because I'm like, oh, actually, feel young for once. But with that said, entering the workforce in 2009, that was the year I started full time at EY. Even in that amount of time, I've seen such a huge difference as well in really what's changed. So I think whether it was 25 years ago or 11 years ago, that just goes to show that the industry is really kind of rapidly evolving and constantly changing. It's grown so much. Starting out, I feel like it was super competitive, even to get into this industry that I'm in. Whereas in the last 7 to 5 years, we've just had so much exponential growth that I feel like we're actually constantly, looking for new folks to join us, and, new interns, new staff. And I really feel like that's just because of the kind of massive growth and the fact that, financial services in particular really has kind of just constantly changed with the times. Definitely embraced technology. The amount that we use technology has increased tenfold really from when even I started. And then when I hear some of the older partners and such at my firm, they didn't even have computers when they started, which is kind of mind-boggling. So it just makes me think, if so much has changed in just 10, 11 years, what will the next 10 years hold, which is great, because I just think that leads to more and more opportunities down the line.
That's perfect. No, I completely agree. It's the technology, I think, has probably been the biggest shift that I've seen just during the course of my career. And it's always, again, that AOL Instant Messenger was my go-to. So Caitlin, while you're kind of on stage, so what were some of the challenges that you faced that you kind of think the future grads would see?
Yeah, in terms of challenges, especially, being a woman in the industry, I always generally did feel kind of outnumbered sometimes, even in my earlier years. And then I also felt like as I moved up at the firm, from staff to senior manager, there always just seemed to be more turnover with the female professionals. But with that, I also feel that brought more opportunities. Because I think a lot of firms definitely recognize the importance of diverse workforce, and a big component of that is women. But at the same time, when you go into a board meeting and you're at a table with 20 people, and 19 of those are men, which has definitely happened a couple times, it can definitely feel a little bit intimidating. But at the same time, that also leads to opportunities as well. So just kind of trying to, move past that challenge and recognize it as more of an opportunity for growth and ability to set yourself apart, I think is definitely an important factor.
And just touching on that, so the opportunities, so how would you, if you were talking to your 18-year-old self or 20-year-old self, what would you say to how to turn those opportunities? And then we'll go around to Donna and Leslie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely embrace them. That's for sure. The more that I think you kind of can network within your companies and within your industries, by participating in even just community service events, or staying connected with your college, just kind of staying connected within the industry and networking would be my probably my biggest advice. It's definitely very easy to kind of get lost in the weeds and like get lost in kind of like the details and trying to do like a really good job at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but kind of maintaining that network would probably be like my biggest advice, and something that I don't think I was that great at when I was starting out.
Great, thank you. Donna, how about you? What do you see? What challenges have you faced? And same question on the opportunities. What would you tell your 20-year-old self on how to capitalize on those opportunities?
Yeah, sure. So, it's sort of interesting. I think we all probably entered the workforce, even if it's a couple more than 2 years apart. You have like a different opportunity set available to you. Like I entered the workforce like after the Silicon Valley bubble burst, and then I actually went through grad school to try to figure it out, and then came out after 9/11 where there was like very limited jobs. And then clearly I had a lot of interns and summers who had sort of like, everything available open to them. So maybe it's more, but I think however the opportunities presented to you, it's sort of like the mix and match of like, are you going to find the job that you necessarily want? So right now there are a lot of jobs right now like focus on technology and compliance and other aspects in finance. And there's definitely a lot of people who, all they want to do is investment banking, or they want to somehow get into private equity, or they only want to do X amount in finance. And so the thing is, it's sort of like, how do you sort of say like, there's a lot of jobs available, but the one job you want is like 1 in a million. So I sort of say like the same as Caitlin, which is, figure out what your strength is, right? It's sort of like a sales pitch of yourself to whoever it is that's going to be your future employer. The tides do turn, the market does change, and like there's going to be times where you're employed and you want to switch jobs and there's not going to be a lot available to you, but things like networking, or even in your current role, like if you want to be a superstar like Leslie and stay at the same job for 25 years and like figure out like who at your firm can get you into that division that you actually prefer to be in, or how do you like attach yourself to projects and make yourself super valuable so that you're the first call someone makes when that thing is available to you. And so I think that there's probably going to be like a lot of challenges that people face 20 years ago, 10 years ago, now and going in the future, irrespective of what like all the job postings are on like ladders.com, et cetera. But I would go with what Caitlin said, which is, avail yourself, make yourself valuable, network in the way that's comfortable and, organic to you. And I think like things will work out. I think the other thing is, since this is like a female women-centric panel, is sort of the perception of like how women behave in the workforce and how your communication style is perceived. And some of the hardships I think are like, I'm not a wallflower, I don't pull punches. And instead of being told like, oh, you have total command of the room, it's sort of like you're bossy or you're a 4-letter word, or there are other ways of being perceived. And so, I think it's gonna take time and sort of like a culture shift. But I think like, for everyone who's coming out of college now, they can take it as an opportunity to educate communication styles to their peers and to others, and also just to be like forgiving about other people around them, especially women, and taking the opportunity to be like, all right, she definitely knows what she wants, and instead of castigating them into like they're in a certain bucket with like a lot of nice words, figure out what the strength is and sort of like figure out how to make that directive. And I think that'll be helpful, like figure out new opportunities as well.
I actually had this conversation with my mother earlier today. I was telling her about the panel. I said, it's amazing. You see women, someone drops their pocketbook, you help them. Oh, you have lipstick on your teeth. There's all these things that you want to do. In the workforce, it's a lot different. It's, oh, you're bossy. You did this. And you're just like, it's the same person I just helped with their bag. So, Leslie, I'll turn it to you. Especially with the career that you've, the time frame starting in 1986. So, what have you, challenges that you've faced, and what do you think for new college grads?
So, I would say the challenges I faced when I started in the workforce, you kind of started at the bottom and you paid your dues, and you kind of knew you had to do that. But you stayed there a long time, but if you did your job well, other opportunities would show themselves. And, I would say for me, my network, I was developing my network, and opportunities would show up. I felt like, somebody would show up and say, are you interested in this job? And I would take it, and I moved along. And I've been in many different roles at Fidelity because of that, all around on the institutional side and the capital markets, on the retail side. I think one of the problems was, though, that at that time, if you performed and you got new opportunities, you weren't always prepared for them like you are now, that they would give you the job and you kind of had to grow into it or fit into it. And I think, and maybe I'd be like, oh God, I need to read a book. So I probably had to go to like 10 bookstores, on the weekend to find the information I need. I think you guys are so lucky in that you guys can always be prepared for your next job. You can always be thinking, I think there's just so much more openness and wanting to help, mentoring. We have so many networking programs at Fidelity that it's just so easy to meet other people, to understand where the other opportunities are, and to start preparing yourself for it, rather than in my generation where, again, you were sort of thrown into something and you sort of had to figure it out. I think another challenge, and I think this has been a career balance, is sort of the work-life balance. I'm not sure if I'm the only person who's had this issue, but I think financial services has been known to be a very, intense place. Especially when in the 80s and 90s, I don't know very many people in financial services who had good work-life balance. And I think that's evolved. So I'm happy for all of you entering the marketplace there. I think, that there is a lot more appreciation that it is valuable sort of for your mental health. And I think too, we recently moved in the past couple of years to agile delivery and agile methodology, and that's permeated the company. I think it's allowed us to work more efficiently and deliver more faster. And I think because of that you're wasting less time. And fortunately, that sort of aided the work-life balance, in addition to sort of HR and, yoga classes and apps and other things that you can do to sort of keep yourself, keep your stress level down, so sort of balancing yourself as a person. So what did you said, what advice would I give my 18-year-old self would be, or 22-year-old self would be?
Beginning of college, end of college, anywhere in between.
Just, find something you love, do your job, and just do it well. Just be passionate about what you do, enjoy it, always be giving it your best efforts. And I think people recognize that, and I think they want to work with you. And I think that creates opportunity.
So just on the same challenges, and I think we've probably all seen this, where you start in a particular role and you move up through your career. How do you, and this is a little bit off, but how do you get people within your firm or wherever you are to recognize that you're not the entry-level associate that you came in as? Especially as a female, I think I personally have experienced that it's a little bit easier for men. So I think for women, it's like, well, I had you in this role, and like as you continue to move up, sometimes you don't necessarily get to that. It's not recognized right away. Leslie, while we have you, can you touch on that? Especially just, because you've had so many roles within Fidelity.
I don't think I had that issue, but one of it is, and I know we probably will talk about this, is because I had a mentor. So early in my career, as I started on the phones, I started an entry-level job. And then we started creating workstations for all the phone associates, so they could more efficiently do their jobs. And I started, I was on loan, and then they sort of created the function, and I started working with a gentleman in that group, and he created a role for me. And then when when you have that sort of protection, or you're under somebody's wing, I think it sort of negates that problem. I didn't have the issue of not getting, the respect, from my new role. I didn't really have an issue with that. And again, when he moved to another role in the business and he moved over to the institutional side and built a group again, he said, I want you to come over with me. And I did. I probably was younger than a lot of the people over there at the time. We were building a group, but I think I had that protection of a person, and he had my back, which sort of helped negate those problems.
Well, that's great. Donna, how about you?
So I would say I've definitely been mistaken as someone's secretary. I think I definitely I came to Antares a year and a half ago. Someone's like, she's the new risk analyst. I was like, I'm glad you think I'm so young. So I think some of it is, it does happen. Sometimes even if you have a mentor who does look out for you because they're not going to be by your side all the time. But part of it is like, let it happen. Try not to be offended. And if you can't, use it to your advantage, right? So sometimes people are more willing to talk to you if they think you're more junior, or if you're the secretary, or if you can be the holder of all secrets. So in a way, like, you can spin it to your advantage and try to figure out like, what is the color, what's the temperature of the room. And then the other ways, like, just sometimes like your work can speak for itself. And it's also kind of funny, like you go into a room, everyone thinks you're like this baby junior analyst, and then they're like, oh, so actually the person running this is this managing director, and they're all like looking around and like, hi, I'm here. So I mean, and in a way, like sometimes your titles will carry for you, your experience will carry for you, or also your contributions to the conversation will be like, oh, that's the person who's the subject matter expert. And at that point, it almost doesn't matter what title or what level you are, because you're contributing to the overall project or conversation. And until then, like, just be a little imposter and try to use it for your advantage.
And Caitlin, how about you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I feel like I've had those moments too where maybe someone's like initial reaction is like, oh, this, person's like more junior or just starting out. But I feel like as you, grow up in your career and as you progress, you just naturally develop those executive present type skills. And, to Donna's point, I think once you start engaging in a conversation or talking about a specific topic, I honestly haven't ever really felt like, I wasn't respected in terms of like understanding my level or in comparison to others. Because I feel like as long as you, develop those executive presence type skills, which are sometimes, easier said than done, I don't think it's as much of a factor.
Perfect. So on the same topic, one of the questions that we have is, based on your overall experience, is it better to be well prepared or being perfect in order to be successful? So Leslie, I'll start with you.
I don't think perfection is possible. I've seen many spend so much time and effort working on something to never achieve perfection. I feel like it's always best to be well prepared. And I feel like, it's something you can control, right? Like, I might not be the smartest person in the room. I might not be the most senior. Might not be the most, but I can always be well prepared. If I'm on a project, I am going to take notes. I'm going to, be constantly checking to make sure that I'm delivering, everybody in my group's delivering. If I'm called to a brainstorming session, I'm going to be doing research before I go on in the topic. I'm always going to be prepared and do my best and make sure that I can make a contribution.
Great. Donna, what are your thoughts?
Sure. So I think, just like Leslie, I think there is a huge element to being prepared, but I think there's a combination with maybe not being perfect, but in how you deliver it, right? So just like in school, you can do all the research, you can do all the reading, but in how you deliver it to your professor or to whoever's grading you, they're not gonna be able to translate that you've executed on their assignment or you're delivering for them until there's, maybe it doesn't be perfect, but a delivery system. So I think it's a combination of being prepared, but also how do you translate, make sure that the person understands that not just are you prepared, but you're giving them what they're asking for.
And Caitlin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think, you can never really be more prepared, especially as you start out in your career and trying to learn as much as you possibly can. And that's one of the great things about the Times. I mean, there's just so much knowledge and information out there too that you can find even just by Googling it, which has really evolved so much in the last 10 or so years as well. So I think, using everything you can at your disposal is definitely super important. And, realizing that you will make mistakes, no one's perfect. So I think, as long as you learn from them and then again, prepare more next time, you'll always have a better outcome. And, going into meetings and stuff, you can always tell when people aren't fully prepared. And sometimes, they might sound good and they kind of sound like they know what you're talking about. But then when you kind of start peeling it back and ask questions, you can tell pretty quickly when someone hasn't actually prepared.
We find that a lot, I'm sure, as you're interviewing interns and we're having the conversation. It's like, what do you know about the firm? And I mean, it's out there. Google. It's, you don't have to. You don't have to go to the library to get a book. You don't have to. It's not a full research report. It's just Google it. And we actually ask all of our interns too. What do you know about me? I checked. We asked, have you looked at our LinkedIn profile? So I think that's a big piece of it too. Is there's so much information that we just want to make sure. The research is there. It's almost easy to be prepared now. So just kind of touching on that too. So talking about your networks and when you got your first job, how did your network actually affect getting your first job and your promotions? Leslie, I know you had mentioned kind of having a mentor and somebody taking under your wing. Donna, I'll start with you. How did your network affect getting your first job and promotions?
Yeah, so I think I already mentioned that it was really hard to find a job. So I actually went to law school. For anyone who wants to explore that, give me a call. But I think like coming out, I was like, okay, what do I do? Like everyone's offers were getting rescinded. Like even though no one wants to be a lawyer anymore, like how is it that hard to find a job? So it ended up being that like a network with your students, just like you're doing right now, and you never know whose girlfriend, boyfriend, parent, aunt, uncle may be working in a field that you might be interested in. And it turns out that I wanted to go into executive compensation. And my really good study friend, his girlfriend was like in human resources at PwC and put me in touch with a partner who did executive compensation. So I did financial planning exec comp. And that's how I got my first job. I mean, I can tell you that I've been through and like I've gone through so many jobs at this point, like a merry-go-round, but so I can tell you that a couple of my jobs have definitely been through recruiters, but clearly I think even then it's like networking, making sure that you understand the recruiters you're working with, what are they bringing to the table, that they're not just farming your resumes out to find you your next job, and also clearly by contacts. So my current job is actually like when I was at a hedge fund, I used to do structured products, and I was actually negotiating against JP Morgan, and we would get into some really heated debates. And when they decided to start a asset management business, they called me and I was like, the last time I was on the phone with you, I'm pretty sure we weren't screaming. And they're like, we just found that the way you handled it was like such a good, respectful, educated, academic, but very respectful, professional way. We just thought that you're advocating for them, but now you can advocate for us. So why don't you come over? And so, that's when I started making the transition. And so you'll find yourself like finding your job through a lot of different paths. So I just say, be professional with whoever it is, and your network will open a lot of doors.
Great. Caitlin, what are your thoughts on, your network and getting your first job and then moving on and up?
Yep. Yeah. So I started at EY fresh out of college. I had previously interned at EY when I was in college as well. I went to Iona College in New Rochelle, and I actually, part of the reason I was drawn to EY from the beginning was actually through my network at school. So I was, friends with some older classmates and such that had previously interned at EY and had taken offers for full time the previous year. And a couple of them I really viewed as like mentors, and they really kind of helped, coach me about the firm and then help get me ready for like interviews and just generally being prepared to start my internship and then eventually my job. So my network actually really in college is really what led me to begin kind of my career here at EY. And then obviously I've chosen to stay at EY. I've been here 11 years now. But, with that said, if I ever did decide I wanted to leave or go into, industry, I have, so like an immense network of people, whether it's people I used to work with or partners that I currently work with that I know would, very easily help me kind of navigate a different opportunity, if I so chose.
And Leslie, how about you?
Well, when I started at Fidelity, I was fortunate to have a professor at University of Vermont, where I attended, who set me up for a bunch of interviews because I was really clueless and I did not know where to start. Unfortunately, one of those interviews was Fidelity, and I ended up taking that job. And then I mentioned I had sort of a mentor who guided my career for many years. And then, it was just like Caitlin said, just people I worked with. Either they would call me and say, "Hey, I'm in this job. Are you interested in this? We have an open position." Or if I was a place where, I felt like I'd stopped learning or I want a different challenge, I would call people I had worked with before and just say, "Hey, I'm interested, what's available in your area?" And that's really how I've spent most of my career. Even when I left the workforce for a few years, when I brought for my third child, I was home for a couple of years. I called when I was ready to come back. I called Fidelity, and again, I had several people that I talked to, and I had a couple job offers, and I ended up coming back to Fidelity.
Great. So, if you were to give college students recommendation on developing their network, what would be the 1-2 pieces of advice that you would give them on how to develop that and really how to maintain it? Caitlin, do you mind starting?
Sure. Yeah, I think it definitely starts as early as you can. Most schools have extensive kind of career development centers, and you have so many resources at your disposal by just even, I think, starting, with your own school and starting with your career network, attending events, job fairs and stuff early on, even if it feels like, you're only a freshman and sophomore, it really doesn't hurt just to kind of, get your name out there. And I also think it really helps if you're still kind of navigating your major, if you don't really know yet fully what direction you want to go in. And even if you want to do finance, there's so many different aspects of finance that you can go into. So I think just starting out as early as possible, and just kind of getting your name out there, networking through the Career Center, definitely through your professors as well. I'm sure a lot of the professors have, been in the industry previously, or even, currently, work in the industry as well. And they have immense networks as well. So I think, starting out, would be probably my biggest advice. And that's where, I was able to kind of, navigate into, Big Four.
Great. Donna, what are your thoughts?
So I think networking is a very nebulous term, right? It's like, go out there and go network. It's like, all right, go out there and have a great day. I think it's sort of hard, especially as a college student. You're like, okay, I can literally go network. I have LinkedIn, I have career services, I have professors, I have friends, I have whatever. And it's sort of the world's your oyster. But I think the idea is you need to be strategic, right? I'm sure you guys have all heard networking or interviewing for a job is a job into itself. And so you kind of view it as your time is a limited resource. How would you best utilize that time to make networking productive for you, right? So in a way, it's going back to the idea there's an organic way that's going to be your strong suit. So if you can make meaningful LinkedIn connections because there's an angle that you're using to connect with people and to do follow-up, and that you're going to follow up and make it a meaningful conversation that could lead to further conversations, great. But if you're going to go out there and just literally just connect with 300 people, maybe everyone that you see on this GameX forum, and just hope one day that there's going to be some way that you can find a job, I think that's a harder networking activity. I think it's also use career services, having what your expectations are. So for those who don't know what kind of career you want in finance, going through and limiting and narrowing down to what the scope is. And for those of you guys know that you definitely want to go into private equity, or you definitely want to go into investment banking, or you want to go into a certain field, finding people who are actually in that field and understanding there are different paths and a lot of different milestones that you have to make to get into or break into that field, and then make your networking plan kind of customized to what it is that you want to do.
Oh, that's great. Leslie, what are your thoughts?
I think the networking events, and those type of things I think are great in terms of expanding your mind and things you might want to do. But I've found that it's just, the people I've worked with, people that I went to college with, even sort of family friends, are the ones when I actually want to get a job, are the people who will sort of step in and advocate for me. So I think, and again, you brought up a great point, Donnie. I mean, you only have such a limited amount of time. We're working. It is work, but I always keep in touch with my network. Not just because, I wanted, I might be looking for another job, but because I worked and, I enjoyed them as people as well. So there's sort of that connection to them, as well as a personal connection, as well as a work connection to them.
No, that's great. And we actually, I'm on the Quinnipiac Dean's Advisory Board for the business school. And it's one of the things that we're talking about is really just working with students so that they have a better connection to their alumni networks. And it's a warm handoff instead of that, I'm just going to send this out. So it's an initiative and it's something that we're working on too, because I'm happy if a student calls me and says, hey, can you help me? I'm happy to do it. I'm sure everyone here feels the same way. So, and then just talking about networking and Leslie, you hit on this a couple of times. How important is having a mentor for your career development? And Leslie, I'll start with you because I know you've mentioned it, and really having that person to kind of guide you along.
I think early in my career, it was critical. So I was maybe 3 years out of school, starting a function, technology development of workstations that I knew really nothing about. I was a political science economics major. It was a little bit outside my swim lane, but having somebody that believed in me when, quite honestly, I probably didn't believe in myself at that time was critical. Later in my career, when I felt that I was able to, I felt that I was able to achieve, and I felt better about myself, and I had more confidence. I didn't really have a mentor. I just always had a network I can call on with, people that had sort of different skill sets and different knowledge that I could call on, depending what my need is. I was also very lucky that I had a father who had a really great business mind and act as mentor to many, somebody I could always tell about my day, tell about a situation, tell about my challenges, who could sort of understand and provide me advice too. So that was sort of fortunate throughout my career. But again, probably the biggest thing that supports me now is just having sort of a network of people I can call on with different skill sets and knowledge that can sort of help me where I need it.
That's great. Caitlin, how about you?
Yeah, I think similarly, starting out, I would say I probably had like maybe one or two key mentors who really kind of showed me the ropes, and I just learned so much from, and really made an effort to just get to know them even outside of work, and ask lots and lots of questions, and just use, all their knowledge to just, kind of learn from. But I think as you work your way up, because your network just kind of naturally expands so much, really, exponentially, you really end up with just so many multiple mentors, and you might have certain people that you go to for certain, subject matter expertise, and, in all the different maybe fields that you work in. But especially, early on, it really helps having that person kind of advocating for you. And it definitely is one of the reasons that I've chosen to stay at EY as long as I have, because, I always had that kind of personal connection with someone, that would really help me kind of grow and develop.
Well, that's great. And Donna, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's really important to find a mentor, and for everyone who's out there who's like having a heart attack because they don't have a mentor now, or they're worried about like, if I join a firm and I don't have a mentor within week 2, doesn't mean my career has gone to dust. I think the idea is like, mentors are what you make of it, right? So some firms have formal mentorship programs. It's a two-way street. So figure out how you're going to make that meaningful for yourself. If not, find yourself, whether it's an informal mentor or someone that you can, bounce ideas off of, get a sanity check on like when you want to ask certain specific kinds of questions. I think those who, are out a year or two or more as they get more senior, I've heard the idea that you should get yourself a board of directors, right? So you're not limited to one mentor for your life. Like companies have a board because not everyone's going to have the same opinion or the same point of view. So if you surround yourself with like really great advisors, they might not necessarily be mentors per se, but they will sort of help give you different views as you make decisions. And then I think like the idea is that the one thing I learned when I was at Pine Bridge was if you are assigned a mentor mentee, like they had this rule where the mentee had to actually, set the schedule, set the agenda, set the goals, and schedule the meetings. Don't be a passive mentee. Like I don't think you guys would be, but just word of advice is if you want to get a lot of mentorship relationship, be active in it and understand like what you want and be clear about like what kind of relationship you want to have with your mentor to make sure that there's like a meeting of the minds as to what expectations are.
Completely agree. We're doing that now in my office too. And I think your mentor also evolves kind of over the course of your career. So who may be your mentor for the first 5 years, maybe somebody different 10 years later, 15 and so on, because it's really the stepping stones of where you're growing in your career. So now we're going to turn to some audience questions, which is great. And there's a ton in here. So very, very exciting. So the first one is from Bobby, who attends Moravian College. And the question is, for someone starting out in finance out of college, do you think passing the CFA Level 1 exam would help her look more attractive to employers? And if not, what would you suggest to stand out to financial firms in getting hired? So Donna, I'll start with you.
I think the idea of having CFA Level 1 is a great resume distinguisher, right? So you're getting a pile of resumes, you get like 30 seconds to a minute to scan through it. Having, CFA exam 1 passed is great, or even if you're a candidate for it, it shows sort of commitment to it. I mean, I think, unfortunately, like if you're battling between whether or not you should do all of this time to like keep your GPA up versus like a CFA, I think I'd say go for like graduating, get a great GPA. You can focus on the CFA in a couple of months. But if like all things held equal, like I think the CFA is like, or something equivalent is a great distinguisher.
Anyone want to add to that?
I mean, I totally agree. I started out an accounting background, so I have a CPA, and even just, starting out, it's definitely a big distinguishing feature, folks that are already, starting the exam or have maybe a couple parts passed going, starting into your career. It's definitely not a be all end all, but certifications at an early level is definitely something that can differentiate yourself.
Leslie, any thoughts?
No, I would just agree. I think it's a great designation. I think it's a great body of learning. And, if that's in your interest and you have the time for it, I agree. I think it would be just a great way to sort of distinguish yourself.
Completely agree. And I think there's so many different designations. You kind of have to find that passion of where you want to be, whether it's certified financial planner, CFA for the certified financial analyst. I mean, there's just so many. There's now divorce specialists, there's retirees. I mean, it's really, there's so many selections. So it's find your passion. And I would say definitely pick one of those. So the next question is from Joanna. And I have to laugh. Do you think that men know more about investing than women? And if yes, great. Then how do we improve it for women? If no, I think we all know women are historically better investors than men. I think there's many studies on this actually. But Leslie, I'll turn it to you.
Do I think men are better investors? No, I do not think they are. I think some men are great at it. I do think women are better investors. I had a focus group on this maybe 5 years ago, and women love to do research. They just, where I think men sometimes would go with their gut feel a little bit more. Women just loved to do research, and I think they were very careful about their investments. I do think less men at the time, and I hope this is changing, were less intimidated by investing. And I think we do have an issue that a lot of women are intimidated right now by investing. I can only hope that this huge surge of investors over the past year, when everybody's been sort of stuck home with COVID, has sort of changed that balance a little. I know I've had a lot of, younger cousins and neighbors, et cetera, call me about how do I get started investing that are women, and I'm just really excited to see it. But no, I don't think men are necessarily better investors. I think women make terrific investors. I think you just need to not be intimidated by it and take the time to learn. One of my favorite parts of my job is I run our special events. I run special events each month where we have 3-hour educational webinars on various topics to get people started. And that is one of the most rewarding part of my job. So I would say if you're going to get started, I would just take the time. There's just so much free education out there just to get a strong basis so you're able to feel confident in your decisions.
That's perfect. Donna, Caitlin, anything to add there?
Yeah, there's actually like an article that came out last year in the Wall Street Journal, and it sort of went through the history of women in leveraged loans and CLOs, which is actually started from a piece done by Citi. So Citibank runs like a really huge structured products desk, and the head of research is a woman named Maggie Wang. And she was just like scratching her head at a conference, and she said, there are 19 men for every one female at these like conferences. You see like Big Short, right? In the Big Short, they all go to Vegas. It's a bunch of guys, and there's like the one girl, and then the movie is like the girl holding the notepad. But if you go to Vegas for this conference, it really is like one girl for like every 19 guys. And she was like, how is this possible? Like, I swear I think women are better at portfolio management than men. And she actually went through and she dug through all these CLO portfolios, and she came up with this research piece, and she published it, and people were like kind of poo-pooing and then like kind of scratching their heads. And then it sort of was like all these women who were portfolio managers were like, oh yeah, like if you look at the IRR, their actual portfolio, it's actually like really strong. And then the Wall Street Journal picked up on it, and they were saying like, leveraged loans was basically relegated to women because guys didn't want to do it in the 70s and 80s. And all of a sudden all these women came up, and you have these like powerhouse, like 50, 60-year-old portfolio managers, and they're like, there's like something like special about like women and investment. So, that misnomer of what it is, I think is what Leslie says, there's sometimes like a fear of speaking up or being convicted on a portfolio construction or convicted on a specific investment. And that shouldn't be viewed as like knowing less or being a less powerful investor. So for all you ladies out there, go get it.
Caitlin, anything?
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, I think we do tend to naturally be a little bit like risk averse, perhaps, as it compares to men. But I don't think that makes us any, worse investors. And generally, I think the most successful like asset management firms and managers out there are ones that have more diverse teams of, men, women, and all different backgrounds, really. And I think a lot of the most successful managers have realized that it's really best to have diverse opinions and views to ultimately deliver the most alpha.
Perfect. Our next question, it's actually 2 parts from Andrea Morgan. The first part is, how do you think women undergrads can get their foot in the door when it comes to financial internships or entry-level jobs? Anyone want to jump in for this one? Caitlin, we'll go to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, I'm the I guess most recent out of college. I mean, I think getting your foot in the door. I can't stress the importance enough of getting an internship where you can, even if it's something that maybe doesn't seem completely relevant to where you ultimately want to go. To the question we had earlier on the CFA designation, having that as a resume booster as well, just having any type of like relevant internship or work experience can, absolutely, differentiate yourself and help get your foot in the door, even if you do an internship and you kind of feel it's not exactly what you want, or, it's just kind of for the summer type thing. I think it really helps to kind of just booster your resume and booster your knowledge and help you be more prepared, entering the workforce once you actually graduate.
Perfect. And then the second part of the question is, how can women new to the workforce navigate feeling underqualified for a job, but also wanting to have job negotiations and getting paid their worth? Donna?
I'm sorry, I haven't figured out how to raise your hand on Zoom, and I know like after a full year of this, I tried to figure it out. But
we'll figure it out probably at 2:15.
So like, one of the things I've heard, and like Leslie and Keelan, I don't know if you've heard this as well, it's like when you go through sort of these like job postings and we have like this wish list of all these different things. They say that historically, like men will apply for the jobs even if they get 5 out of 12 or 5 out of 10, whereas like women will only apply for the jobs if they get like 10 out of 10, and only if they think like 10 out of 10 rank like 10 or higher, right? And so I think the idea is like, you know, when you think about how you view yourself versus how the person who's going to pick you views you, just imagine like that this pool is going to be full of people who are, you know, super, super qualified, medium qualified. And like the advice I've always given people is don't be the person to take yourself out of the opportunity, right? Like don't be the person who disqualifies yourself. Let someone else do that. Like always throw your hat in the ring. If you at least have a couple of them to meet the qualifications and sort of just like go from there. I mean, I think you absolutely have to be your best advocate, and not putting yourself out there means you're not advocating for yourself.
Great. And then our next question comes from Cassandra Wakefield. As a woman and as an international student, I found it very hard to get my resume noticed due to these restrictions, regardless of my talent. Do you have any recommendations on what I can do to get noticed, specifically as an international student? I feel with online applications, as soon as you click, will you or now in the future need sponsorship? That's a major barrier. Any recommendations on how to get around this?
So, I mean, I think as an international student, you have OPT time, which is limited to like 18 to 24 months, depending if you've done an internship, like in your summer years. And so it's trying to figure out, I think what your question is, you know, how do you find permanent sponsorship while also having a limited amount of time to get out there and do work experience? So like, I think like they just passed an act in Congress about like repealing sort of the immigration limitations that were in place over the last 4 years. So hopefully the H-1B visas like kind of open up and allow for more professional experience as well as more grad school experience. I would say that generally as an employer who's going through like international applicants versus those who don't need sponsorship, the numbers game is hard because undergraduate students are harder to get through the sponsorship process. So things like getting a graduate degree or applying for a grad school for an extension of your OPT, as well as the other things you can do is looking for jobs where there isn't necessarily a huge pool of applicants, because if they have to compare like the person that they get through sponsorship through others, one of the questions that immigration requires you to do is to do a level set expectation check as to can this be filled by a natural citizen. So those are some of the things that you can do. The barrier is like a little tough, but I think hopefully with the repeal of the immigration stuff for the last 4 years, it should get easier.
That's great. And then just as we're coming up to the hour, we'll go with one more question. Comes from Caroline King. How have you handled or overcome being treated differently because you're a woman? I experience it now and sometimes try and take a step back, but I'm unsure if that's the best solution. I don't want to have to lessen who I am or my passion for someone else. I'll open this. I think we all probably have an opinion on this one. Leslie, I'll turn to you for this to start.
I think we talked about it a little, but I think it's just being confident in yourself and how you present yourself. Caitlin, you might have said it, just sort of that executive present. I mean, you need to feel that you belong there and you know your value. And, you know, I don't know. Again, I really haven't had much problem with this because I think I always go in with that presence about I belong here, and I have value. And again, I think too some of it's inside of you as well. Like when you don't have confidence in yourself, you can let those things get to you, right? If you don't, it slides off you, right? I don't care what this person thinks, right? There's always going to be an unkind person in the room, whether it's because you're a female or they don't like the way your hair looks or whatever it is. But I think, again, your attitude and not letting it bother you too is another really important part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think right when you start questioning yourself and lacking that confidence, that's where, maybe you would start to feel that way. But I think as long as you approach any situation with, kind of the utmost confidence, like we talked a lot about, like being prepared for any situation. I also agree, like I don't feel like it's been a barrier, or I don't feel like I'm treated differently in any way.
Donna, anything to add?
I think on the flip of Leslie and Caitlin, where maybe I should go work for Ernst & Young, but Antares is great, but I've definitely been in situations where I've been told, we should have fired you when you told us you were pregnant. These things definitely still exist. So for all of you who are out there, there are definitely employers like Fidelity and Ernst & Young who, get voted as great places for women to work. And there are definitely places in finance where they probably still have a 1970s, 1980s mentality, and it is sometimes tough goings. And I will say that I think of myself as a really tough person, but I've definitely locked myself in a room with a glass of wine and a box of Oreos. So, for those of you who are out there who are feeling that, you come talk to me, it's a real thing. But I think the important thing is just understanding that maybe you are having your confidence shaken. It can get better. There are definitely different places out there. Sometimes it's not about you having to change the way you are, but just finding a different game to play, right? So you don't necessarily have to be beholden to them. One of the places I worked didn't tell me this, but they're I don't care about that person. It's a democracy. They can walk with their feet. But at the end of the day, you can go and play a totally different game. Until then, I would say keep your head up. Don't let them know that they've gotten to you. I can tell you that all of these women are probably gonna tell you finance is a power play, a power struggle. They want to know they've got you under their thumb. And so some of it is fake it till you make it. Fake it till you find a place that appreciates you and that you feel that you're comfortable and that you're accepted for your authentic self. So, keep your head up and eat your Oreos in a pantry. It'll be fine.
I completely agree. And I want to thank you all today for participating. And I think we got to most of the questions on, unfortunately, there's a couple more, but we're running out of time. So again, thank you so much for participating. And I hope to talk to you ladies very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.